I've discussed the population growth issue in the context of climate change and impact on consumption. It's complicated in the sense that since the Industrial Revolution, the rich have consumed a lot, and poor people even now have a very low carbon footprint. So even when you look at the average per capita carbon footprint in India or China, they may look low compared to Europe or the US, but you are averaging over a very large range. The range is much smaller in a place like US or Europe, but in India and China you have very poor people living at a very low carbon footprint and rich people living basically on the Western level of carbon footprints, right? So in that context, population gets mentioned all the time, and now we have lots of population growth rates or fertility rates falling below replacement in many countries. Even China has hit peak population, and the Chinese government is desperately trying to incentivize women to have children, but fortunately or unfortunately it turns out that educated women who are financially well off actually want to have fewer kids or maybe even no kids. There's a lot of details there. So I wanted to cover this article for that purpose in the context of climate action. What is the role of this population growth, and is it really new? And this relates to the previous podcast on how Anthropocene condition has come along based on basically the evolutionary traits we have had all along, even when we were hunter-gatherers or before. Positive feedbacks and deep time transitions of human populations. Basically, this argues abrupt and rapid changes in human societies are among the most exciting population phenomena. Human populations tend to show rapid expansions from low to high population density, along with increased social complexity in just a few generations. And we have seen this in the Holocene quite often. Such demographic transitions appear as a remarkable feature of the Homo sapiens population dynamics, most likely fueled by the ability to accumulate cultural and technological innovations that actually modify their environment. So since the modern industrial revolution, lifespan went up, child mortality went down, population growth became super exponential, all related to how technology, medicine, and so on began to allow us to live longer and longer. Not necessarily brain functions being intact along the way, but anyway, we are especially interested in establishing if the demographic transitions of prehistoric populations show the same dynamic signature of the Industrial Revolution transition, a positive relationship between population growth rates and size. There is also individual fitness and so on that we'll come back to. Our results show that population growth patterns across different prehistoric societies were similar to those observed during the Industrial Revolution in developed Western societies. These features, which appear to have been operating during most of our recent demographic history, from hunter-gatherers to modern industrial societies through the agrarian evolution, imply that dynamics of cooperation underlie sudden population transitions in human societies. This article is part of the theme issue, Evolution and Sustainability, Gathering the Strands of Anthropocene Synthesis. Okay. My throat is getting dry, so let me get a sip of tea. What is the background? Abrupt and rapid climate changes in the size and complexity of Homo sapiens populations are among the most exciting socio-ecological phenomena. Human populations tend to show rapid expansions from low to high population density and social complexity in relatively few generations. Such demographic transitions appear as a remarkable feature of Homo sapiens population dynamics, most likely fueled by the interaction of cultural technological innovations that actively modify the environment and changes in life history in response to environmental and cultural changes. So we have this cycle of developing a technology to exploit resources fast, modify the environment, and adapt to the modification of the environment and keep increasing our efficiency. It's called socio-cultural niche construction and so on that we talked about before. In fact, the proposed Anthropocene epoch can be viewed as a global process of human niche construction driven by the synergistic interactions between population dynamics, the dynamics of cultural evolution. Most of our recent demographic history, from prehistoric hunter-gatherers to agrarian to modern industrialized societies, can be represented by a similar structural cooperative dynamics, the signature of human population transitions. Okay, the signature of human population transition. Sorry, I'm mucking this up a little bit. We find it exciting and essential to perceive that the Anthropocene epoch has been caused by the same process but powered by a new rich source of energy, i.e. fossil fuel. So the energy source allowed us to explode, and we are now facing this climate change Anthropocene. Anthropocene, again, not accepted as an official geologic period, but nonetheless the terminology is going to persist. The general objective of this study is to connect anthropoecological theory, AET, we talked about before, in particular the idea that there is a positive feedback among niche construction, ecosystem engineering, and human population size, with the analytic approach of population demographic transitions. I think that's PDT. AET is the anthroecological theory that builds on previous theoretical studies that described the coupled population culture dynamic to explain the sudden demographic transitions in human populations. The basic tenet is that technological innovations modify the environment and the energy fluxes from the environment, which affects population growth. We propose that the demographic transitions of prehistoric populations are characterized by a positive relationship between population growth rates and size, as a dynamic signature of the underlying positive feedback loop between the increase in population size and the improvements in resource extraction via cultural evolution and technological innovations. Many words, but you know how they are all related. Even when the positive feedback owing to cooperation, i.e. alley-type demographic dynamics, which basically means population density and individual fitness, these have been detected in pre-industrial societies as well, to the best of our knowledge. No study has addressed the population growth. On the other hand, processes behind the sudden demographic transitions of human societies or the potential generality of such transitions. Okay, so they put some equations together and do some modeling. I won't go into the details, but you can see that looking at the summative probability distributions of different geographical regions and the calibrated years before the present, the vertical dotted red line denotes the estimated breaking date of the major shifts in population expansions, and the vertical black dotted lines the periods of population growth used in the population transition analysis. So the axes are different. Middle East goes back to 14,000, here comes up to about 4,000 years, but here calendar years before present start from 0. So you can read the details, but the main point is that in the past, according to this modeled reconstruction of populations, all regions from the Middle East to Europe, East Asia, South America, South Africa, West Africa, North America, Australia, even Australia, which was colonized only recently, have had some transitions, even though you can see that Australia only got colonized very, very recently. So present here is 0. Okay, so you get the idea that the population explosion we are seeing now which is flattening out, is not really so new. So this is just the time series of logarithmic net reproductive rates based on the selected periods of sustained growth from the SPD time series that we just saw. So New East Europe, so different regions, but these shaded regions are where they have stable population growth, and then they look at how the log reproductive rates change. So you can see again, if you go back to a millennium, there have been population explosions, and we called it before as upscaling, downscaling, and stable selections, right? So that also works here in examples of observed reproductive curves against populations in time of the summative probability distribution time series, when logarithmic reproduction rates are plotted against natural logarithm of SPD. Basically, again saying that you have rates that grow, and they have you can grow and then collapse, grow, collapse. So you have kind of a inverse U, or a Kuznets curve, that explains some of the same mechanisms working over time. So you have different time here. Nearest 10,860 to 10,530 calendar years before present. This is for Europe. This is for Australia, much more recent, 4290 to 3750 calendar years before present, and South America going to 4710 to 3990. Okay, different periods and different lengths of time series. This is the frequency distribution of the periods in years of uninterrupted population growth observed during the demographic transitions, with a mean of 365 years. So the periods of population growth rates, growth rate pulses in terms of number of years, you can see how the longer periods have much lower frequency. That's how you can think of 800 years of population growth rate pulses are very low in frequency, but smaller population growth rates have much higher frequencies, which probably is related to the niche construction, just in terms of the feedbacks between population, resource exploitation, birth rates, resource availability, and so on and so forth. Why there is a dip here and here, you have to go and read the article. So I'm going to conclude with the discussion and a few conclusions. Discussion is also very long, but I'm going to keep it short. By implementing a theoretical empirical modeling approach from the population demographic transitions, am I saying this correctly? Let me make sure that I read PDT and SPD and so on, but sometimes I forget, and then I begin to imagine the terminologies. So going back and doing this in real time is always tricky, especially because my Acrobat reader on the tablet has gone kaput. Sorry, so it is population dynamic theory, not demographic transition. Sorry about that. Population dynamic theory. Please apply the correction to the previous wrong mentions. Okay, so population dynamic theory, here we provide empirical evidence that the long-term dynamics of past populations appear tied to multiple demographic transitions. Specifically, these results illustrate how alley-type population growth processes, i.e. positive feedback owing to cooperation, was an inherent phenomenon in the trajectory of human populations, at least during the Holocene. Okay, so during the last 10-12,000 years, there's always been this upscaling, downscaling, and stability of selection. These results support earlier work that attempted to explain how exponential growth could occur in hunter-gatherer populations. Thus, neither the NDT, Neolithic demographic transition, this I remember very well, nor the Western European demographic trajectory after the mid-18th century are unique, but rather specific instances of a general pattern of human population growth. Okay, so it's good to remember that we increase the scale to global levels, but the underlying processes of population dynamics and demographic transitions are the same. This means that demographic impacts that occurred during the Industrial Revolution have deeper time precedents. We suggest that such demographic transitions are qualitatively and mechanistically comparable and governed by the positive feedback between population sizes and the improvements in resource extraction and use via cultural and technological innovations. So since the Industrial Revolution, technological innovations exploded, resource exploitation exploded, energy intensity exploded with fossil fuels and so on. These results reveal a much more complex process explaining how humans evolved from small populations of a few thousand individuals during the Pleistocene to approximately 8 billion people, becoming the major driving force of the Earth system. So at some point we came very close to going extinct with just a few thousand individuals left during one of those ice age and warm periods. So ice age is not just one long cold period. You have transitions. So we have had 100,000 year cycles with 8 or 9 ice ages and deglacial periods during the Pleistocene. Okay, so I will skip these details here, but again, the models of niche constructions tell us that humans are of one generation build new environments that are inherited by the following generation, which in turn modified again for the next generation. So this is what we are dealing with now, and we call it sustainability when we say we are damaging the environment too much for the next generation, and we think about intergenerational equalities and so on, right? So what are the conclusions? Our results suggest that a much more flexible approach is required to understanding human population dynamics by including cooperation and competition as general principles driving demographic changes. Given the present controversy about how human population dynamics can be a cause or a consequence of socio-cultural innovations, we present support for the idea of a mutual feedback relationship between demography and cultural dynamics. Prehistoric human societies exhibited the same humped reproduction curves, right? Rise and collapse, transitions. Upscaling, downscaling is better. So during most of the human population transitions happened, and this is similar to Industrial Revolution in the developed Western societies. Over much of the Holocene, human population trajectories experienced waves of accelerated growth rates, probably driven by a positive feedback loop among the population size and technological innovations to a propensity towards unsustainability and socio-ecological crisis and disruptive upscaling and downscaling processes. We propose that the accelerated population growth of an industrial societies was caused by the same process as most of the previous historical transitions, but powered with a new rich source of energy, i.e. fossil fuels. Moreover, these features appear to have been operating during most of our recent demographic history, from prehistoric hunter-gatherers through agrarian to modern industrialized societies. Thus, the structural instability of cooperation dynamics seems to be the signature of population transitions in human societies. Where are we headed with that? Basically, you want to again come back to think about how this evolutionary aspect of how we grow and fall can transition to sustainability and climate action in the current context. Okay, if we understand that what we are doing is nothing new, it's just that the energy source made us explode like this, then what can past transitions teach us for the current transition that we need from exploiting resources at these unsustainable rates to go and become more sustainable? Okay, so let's leave this and come back and read some more interesting papers in this topic. I love this evolutionary aspect of who we are and what it means for the way we do things and how we may or may not change our ways. Okay.